Right now, you're looking at live pictures of President Trump and the President of the United Arab Emirates meeting at the presidential palace in Abu Dhabi. It's the third day and third country President Trump visited on this Mideast tour, and the president has reveled in the pomp and circumstance. You're seeing some of it right there. Red carpet welcome in Abu Dhabi. But the president is also facing questions about where he wasn't, in Turkey, for the Russia-Ukraine peace talks.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved because too many people are dying.
President Trump's visit to Abu Dhabi and his push for peace in Ukraine is just part of a much bigger breakneck diplomatic effort with mixed results. CNN's Alex Marquardt joins the panel now. Let's start first on this question of Ukraine and Russia and what we just heard from the president.
Yeah, I mean, the president is coming off of a week of a trip to the Middle East that went off without a hitch. It went as well as it possibly could have for him, with the exception of the distraction as far as he's concerned about the Qatari plane. And now, to some extent, he's coming crashing back to reality, where this Middle East trip with countless economic deals that have been signed is running straight into the far thornier issue of trying to end this war in Ukraine. And we thought we were moving towards a potentially momentous meeting with the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and potentially Trump all at the table. Remember, it was President Putin who suggested that for the first time in 3 years, the Russians and the Ukrainians sit down together.
What do you make of what he said about, he thought I wasn't going, I thought he wasn't going? I mean,
there's been so much back and forth, and I think that this is Putin yet again thumbing his nose at this entire process by sending not himself, but a very mid-level junior delegation, while the Ukrainians have sent their top officials. Now Ukraine has scrambled and said, okay, we are going to meet with them. So there is some progress being made. But no doubt this is going to add fuel to the critics, I would say the realists, who think that Putin is playing for time and actually does not want to negotiate.
Can I remind everyone of the cartoon of Lucy and Charlie Brown and the football? I think that's what we just saw again. Putin has delayed and delayed.
Putin is Lucy here.
He is Lucy. Yes, yes. Putin is Lucy. And President Trump looked a little irritated there,
yeah,
and this
did.
if he knew I was going, he would have gone kind of thing. Putin holds the cards here, and he is not ready to have this meeting.
And let's kind of broaden it out, as you did a little bit there, Alex, about the many, many things that the president has been doing just in the past few days. Just today, we saw the president call for a U.S.-led freedom zone in Gaza, days after negotiating, of course, for the release of American-Israeli former hostage Adnan Alexander, who was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. The president also claimed that Iran has sort of agreed to terms on a deal to deny them nuclear weapons program. We'll see if that has traction. And then, of course, we have seen these conversations that he's having right now in Abu Dhabi. We saw the conversations he had in Saudi Arabia. And so it's obviously very mixed what is going on, Isaac. Understandably, because he put such a premium as a candidate on ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Clearly, he hasn't given up. It is much harder than he thought. There are talks now resuming on Israel-Gaza. So mixed bag, I think, is maybe fair, but there have been more successes than perhaps people thought he would have in the short term.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Gaza thing, he's made this announcement now. How does it square with what he said a couple months ago, where the U.S. was going to take over Gaza and redevelop it? How does that work? Part of this is he makes announcements sometimes that people like or that seem like success, and then we have to see what actually comes of them, right? But I think when it comes to the Ukraine situation, we see there most of all in dealing with Putin, but overall, Donald Trump is a man who has done very well on the force of his own willpower. It's gotten him elected president of the United States twice. It's gotten him to be an international celebrity, all of these things. But he is running up against other people who have a lot of willpower. And one of those people is Vladimir Putin, who does not seem to care that much that he is frustrating Donald Trump. As
and
he does
another
this.
one is Benjamin Netanyahu, who
That's right.
in some regards right now is pulling a Putin. He is bending to the pressure, like Putin is, of sending a team to negotiate a ceasefire. But it isn't the highest level team, and Netanyahu isn't showing any sign of really budging when it comes to this IDF operation that they're planning for Gaza. Certainly, there's an immense amount of pressure on both Putin and Netanyahu, but so far they are playing along with Trump, but they're managing to resist him.
As Trump said that he would resolve these things within 24 hours or before he was even inaugurated. It didn't happen because he's running up against these forces.
Well, and that's to the point. Two people under pressure, two world leaders under pressure. Well, you can add President Trump to that list because he himself, to your smart point, had put this deadline of the day one he was going to resolve these wars. Well, the reality is a lot different. And to your point, Jamie, about how he looked irritated, you know, these talks, the way that he was describing them was that nothing was going to go anywhere unless it was him and Putin speaking, which sets up yet another marker of when does that conversation happen. And so as he sets these markers and as they sort of fall away, the question, or these conflicts remain, and the question is, how do they get resolved?
Potential peace talks between Russia and Ukraine may still happen Friday, even without the leaders of either country. Meanwhile, the war rages on. Both sides accuse each other of launching drone strikes overnight. Ukrainian authorities say 5 people were killed and 20 wounded by Russian shelling and other attacks. Take a listen to what these medical workers said.
War does not bring any good. Tens of thousands of people have passed through our walls alone. I'm afraid to give a figure, but the number is of an average Ukrainian city, up to 50,000. This is a lot with such difficult injuries, and unfortunately, it is almost impossible to restore their health. All of them will need rehabilitation, lifelong or annual.
It has been the 4th year of intensive work, 24/7 sometimes. The whole team could stay awake for the entire day. This is the 4th year already.
All right, time now for the exchange. With still no end to the war in sight in Ukraine, let's break down today's events and what they tell us about hopes for a resolution. I'm joined by former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Ambassador Taylor, thanks so much for joining us. So there we saw President Zelensky live up to his pledge that he would in fact show up in Turkey for these talks this week. His counterpart from Russia was not there. I can't say that many are surprised by that outcome, but instead he sent a lower level delegation to which President Zelensky described as just theatrical props. Would you agree with that statement from President Zelensky?
Yeah, I would agree. It is not a serious delegation coming from the Kremlin, from Moscow. And we remember where this came from. With the idea for these discussions today in Turkey came from President Putin last weekend. He felt pressure last weekend coming from the British, French, German, and Polish leaders, and with American support, that he was going to be sanctioned if he didn't agree to a ceasefire. So he said, well, okay, we'll have a conversation on Thursday in Turkey. And then he left it unclear as to whether he would attend until last night, as you've reported. He finally decided he was going to not come and send this low-level delegation. So that's disarray in the Kremlin and causing people to realize, I mean, this is very clear, who's the problem in this negotiation? It's the Russians.
Well, President Trump had intimated at one point during this trip to the Gulf that he himself may travel to Turkey if President Putin also was there. And then today, when asked if he was disappointed about President Putin not showing up, he said, quote, nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, which sort of suggests that he may be willing to grant yet another summit between the two leaders, which is something that Putin all along has wanted. What do you make of that response from President Trump? Because as we noted, this 30-day ceasefire deal was something that he had initially put on the table himself.
You're exactly right. Yana, you're exactly right. This idea for a 30-day ceasefire what came from President Trump. And President Trump and President Zelensky agreed on it. And President Trump took it to President Putin, who said no. Now, on the question of getting the three together, President Zelensky is there. He's in Turkey. President Trump is in the region, and he said he had been willing to come today, might be willing to come tomorrow. Again, the problem is the Russian president. Putin has not said he's going to come, and that will not happen. That three-way conversation can't take place until Putin decides he's going to come to Turkey. So that's where the problem is. The President Zelensky and President Trump are in the region and in the country, ready to meet, and Putin is not.